Welcome to the show that teaches you the things your parents and teachers are too afraid to. The Helios blog. Today, well, we have to talk about it. The woke disaster known as Concord. Guys, it only lost Sony $400 million. Only.
The reason she's alone is because she's difficult.
Women are not accepting the bare minimum.
Women fuck men they respect.
All the women who say things like, I'm strong, independent, I don't need no man, like, y'all impress me.
Women just gaslight each other and say what they want to hear.
Disaster.
On, and it ended up getting shut down less than 2 weeks after its release. A miserable failure, and what all people thought was at least at a minimum a $200 million loss for Disney. And certainly
Disney.
Things have now been shaken up at Firewalk Studios, the dev team behind the game Concord. Concord's director is reportedly stepping down as the game's return remains in limbo.
Yeah. They're gonna make it not woke. They're gonna make it not look like vomit on the screen.
But now we're finding out that not only did it lose $200 million, but in all likelihood, it's over twice that. $400 million was spent during the making of this game. Concord reportedly cost $400 million to develop, and that doesn't include the cost for Sony to purchase the developer, Firewalk Studios, and the reason they bought the studio was for this game.
What a mess.
And this is all coming from Colin Moriarty, who obviously very big name in the gaming space, does Sacred Symbols podcast, doesn't do a ton of like breaking news reports or stuff, but obviously knows a ton of people in the industry, and people come to him with stuff all the time. And now we're finding out just how bad this failure.
Look at how ugly it is. Again, sorry to say the truth, but if your characters aren't good looking, people don't want to look at them. I don't care what your political agenda is.
Was a rumor from Colin Moriarty, host of Sacred Symbols,
very ugly,
claims Firewalk Studios Concord, which was shut down around 2 weeks after it released, cost $400 million to develop. And obviously there were multiple reasons why Concord failed. The price point for another hero shooter in general on the market that's not free to play, and of course the seemingly DEI aspect of so many of these characters, the pronouns, all the bullshit that just turned so many.
Indeed. People who are not political don't want to go to their game and see pronouns and crap. That is what woke idiots care about, which is a small percentage of the population. And if you don't understand that the majority of the population doesn't give a damn about these pronouns and cares more about their bills and like literally anything else, you're going to fail.
Many people off. That's why all these trailers got ratioed to hell. And now just listen to this from Colin.
I think people will be interested about it. The reason that I wanted to talk about it is because some of the assumptions that I had made about the game were dead wrong as far as how much it cost and how much Sony really lost on it. So the big thing that you really need to know here about this is that Concord cost about $400 million to make.
Oh my God.
Disaster.
And
400 million. And he would go on to explain that by the time
dev culture of toxic positivity halted any negative feedback.
They had got the game to basically an alpha build level, Firewalk Studios had already poured in $200 million. And Sony saw this game, they thought this has like Star Wars-like potential. It could be our Star Wars for Sony. And they decided just to get it to minimum viability level that they would have to pour an additional $200 million into the game. And that's exactly what they did. Not to get the game perfect, but to get it at the base level where it would need to be released. So that's $400 million spent on this massive piece of shit, not including whatever they spent to actually acquire the developer themselves. And then, you know, he would go on and talk about this a little bit, about how internally there was so much positivity and you weren't allowed to say anything bad about this game. He described it as toxic positivity surrounding the game. A major expense was urgently outsourcing much of the game to other studios to finish building the game out. and the two fundamental games were not worked on at all up to the point where the game was shown in alpha. Onboarding, nothing about that. There was nothing about how players make their character, all that kind of stuff, or choose their character and get there, and monetization. Two very expensive, very specific and boutique things that happen to games like this. Later in the video, Moriarty claimed executives at Sony and specifically PlayStation Studios boss Helman Hurst were championing the game.
My God, man. Like, it's actually insane.
And believed the game could be their Star Wars. He noted at Sony they were describing the game as the future of PlayStation. They had such major ambition for this game, it was referred to internally as a Star Wars project for Sony. And this is where we get into the toxic positivity levels surrounding the game. And it makes a lot of sense. When you see the way the developers reacted, like they were shocked that people were criticizing the game, makes a lot of sense.
If your characters are ugly, the colors are ugly, the politics is front and center, I don't know what to tell you. It's going to go badly for you.
That no one internally was allowed to actually give any feedback or criticize this pile of shit.
Scratching the surface of it. Ironically, the game was codenamed Chaos behind the scenes. And a major thing about the game is that there was, and I think we can kind of get this vibe from just the nature of the people making it and kind of the way the game reads and all that, a toxic positivity vibe. You weren't allowed to say anything, apparently internally, about this game.
Disaster. So, it's a game that resists criticism?
About how, like, something's wrong with it, character designs are not right, and so on and so forth. They really, truly believe this was Herman Hulst's baby, apparently. And he internally was himself a massive champion of the game. So it's not that. So the reason I'm telling you all of this, it's some interesting information, of course, but it's that I had said when people were like, Concord lost $200 million. Now, people were pulling that money out because that's basically how much like some of the first party games like Ghost of Tsushima, The Last of Us Part 2, etc., kind of cost in that frame. And I was like, there's no way that it cost that much. I was saying like it cost 9 figures probably, like low $100 million, but there's no way it cost $200 million. No, it cost $400 million.
Lordy Lord.
So,
and that is actually, when you look at the budget of all these games, that is the biggest budget for a PlayStation game that we've ever seen in history.
Yeah, so imagine you spend all that money expecting a return. You basically spent what? It's not Avengers Endgame, $1 billion, $2 billion, right? You spent like a quarter of Avengers Endgame or whatever, a tenth. And you get a pile of trash that nobody enjoys. Why? Because you cannot oppose the woke mob. If you oppose them, they cancel you, they fire you. But if you can't have a debate, if you can't critically think about things, you can't do anything.
And it ends up being a cataclysmic failure. Something that estimates were sold less than 20,000 copies, probably significantly less, based on the player numbers we had, based on the amount of people that were playing on PlayStation as well. And of course, they've refunded all that shit. They've shut the game down entirely. It's hard to fathom what an incredible, total, and complete failure this truly is. And this should be a lesson. Maybe you should listen to feedback. Maybe you should listen to fans. Maybe you should listen to gamers. When they tell you, hey, this looks fucked up, this looks stupid, this looks awful, why would I want to play this? Instead of just calling everyone bigots and racists and...
Yep. Oh, you don't like the pronouns? You're an A-word.
Homophobes or whatever else you want to label people, maybe you should listen to them because they're the ones that have to buy your fucking game. And no one bought Concord, no one bought Concord, no one played Concord. And as a result, PlayStation now has one of the most embarrassing failures in the history of gaming.
They literally lost $333 million. Come on, man.
Did not cost. We all thought that it costed $100 million. Well,
I want to talk about Concord. I wasn't going to ever talk about this game again because who really gives a shit? However, And I don't do journalism really anymore, as you guys know, and we talk about this a lot. I was a journalist.
A lot of people don't. Yeah. You're in good company then.
At one time, and I used to break a lot of stories, and these days I don't really grind like that. So the stories that I break these days are usually people, always, not usually, always people coming to me.
Sure.
And someone who worked on Concord reached out to me, and I verified who this person was and went through all of that and talked to this person extensively, for a long time. And got some, I think, interesting information that I can share about Concord. I think people will be interested about it. The reason
We've heard the big reveal already.
that I wanted to talk about it is because some of the assumptions that I had made about the game were dead wrong as far as how much it cost and how much Sony really lost on it. So the big thing that you really need to know here about this is that Concord cost about $400 million to make.
This guy's face, he's like, no way. For a steaming pile of trash.
How?
Game over, they say in the chat.
Oh.
That was hilarious.
8 years of AAA game development? You know what? You're not entirely wrong. Yeah? 8 years, big studio? Oh my god.
Oh my god.
$400 million.
The story
That's
goes that
insane.
Concord, by the time Concord was, so in the first quarter of 2023, Concord had basically entered an alpha state.
Right.
This was before Sony had even purchased the team. But Sony had been working with Probably Monsters, which was the original
So
owner.
they were able to play the game and they still bought it? Well, no wonder that gem guy got kicked out. What the hell was he thinking? What the
for
fuck?
Firewalk, probably since late 2020, maybe 2021 at the latest on Concord. The game was in
Wait, what? He played the game and thought it was Star Wars level? Is that that steaming pile of garbage?
development before that. Up to the point that the game went into alpha state, they had
Go woke, go broke.
already spent about $200 million on it. And it's unclear how much of that money is from Probably Monsters and the original investors into the game and how much of that money was from Sony. There's this term in product development, not only with games, but really with everything. You can like manufacture a shot.
Sure.
You guys might have heard of it. It's called minimum viability or a
minimum viable product. Yeah. MVP.
Minimum viable product.
Yeah.
The idea behind this, or MVP, the idea behind this is that this is like what you're trying to achieve, and it's like once you cross this barrier, you feel comfortable selling it. It's not.
Yeah, that's this is also known as the pre-order bonus. This is what you get whenever you pre-order a game. Yeah, there you go. And that's the way all games are released.
Yeah, nowadays in 2024, they don't release a finished game. They release a minimally viable product, which they then patch. And sometimes, if they're really real assholes, they have you even pay for the patch. They have you pay for that extra content that was intended initially to be in the game, but they're now selling as a secondary product attached to the main product.
Not that it's the best it can be, or that it's what it's going to be by the time you launch it, because there's all sorts of extra stuff you do. But like, this is the minimum viability of the product. When the game had already had $200 million spent on it and was basically in an alpha form in quarter one of 2023, from that point until the game launched, Sony spent another $200 million on it.
Jesus Henry Ford Christ. Look at the guy's face.
How do you do that? Like, I'm really curious, right? Like, how do you make money disappear like that? That's crazy.
More money than like a whole city will make in its life, you know, like a small city.
Yeah, these people should, after they made Concord, they should become like magicians or something.
Throw it in the trash.
They should work for the Federal Reserve. They can get rid of all the inflation. They'll just delete all the money.
Scuttlebutt behind the scenes about Concord is that the game was in a laughable shape. When it was shown, and basically like when the alpha was ready to go, and they were kind of being like, we're ready to kind of get moving towards getting this thing out in the next year or two.
You know what this reminds me of? It's like, when you hire somebody to like repair your roof or, fix the stairs or whatever, and the repairman quotes you like $1,000 or whatever, and it ends up being $8,000 because they just keep adding stupid little things that they need to add on and add on and add on. They just upsell and upsell and upsell and stall the repair as long as possible. Yeah. That.
Sure.
It was in such horrible shape that Sony felt like they needed to spend that much money again. So, 200 plus 200 to get the game to the MVP status, not...
Jesus Christ. How do you spend $200 million and it's...
They threw money at the problem, not understanding what the problem was, so they didn't fix the problem that they wanted to fix, and so it flopped still.
Barely even good enough to release. Oh my god. It's sunk cost fallacy? I think that's what happened. I do. I feel like they bought it and they were so invested into it that they were like, well, we have to do it now. We're this close.
To the status of it being like a great game, to get it to just viability.
Oh my god.
And that at that time in Q1 2023, there was nothing done. Like,
they never marketed it. They knew they were cooked. In the comments
was having to urgently outsource much of the game to other studios to finish building the game out.
So they didn't even do it themselves. So they spent $200 million and the studio couldn't even then figure out a way to do it in-house? Oh my god. Like,
did nobody check the work these guys were doing?
This is how do you do, like, what the hell happened? That's incredible.
And that two fundamental things were not worked on at all up to the point in which the game was shown in alpha. Onboarding, nothing about that. No, like, there was nothing about how players get on, like how they make their character, all that kind of stuff, or choose their character and get there. And monetization. Two very expensive, very specific and boutique things that happen to games like this.
Sure.
And so that's the first thing that
So they don't have what's the really popular game? Fortnite. They don't have what Fortnite does. They don't have what a Call of Duty has. Very stupid.
I wanted to say is that it's not only about the ongoing cost, which would be in the millions to keep the game going per month.
Exactly.
But that the game...
That's why Sony cut the cord. I think that's what it was.
Somebody says that was money laundering guaranteed.
They had already spent $400 million, or they had spent $200 million. They bought the company for like a certain amount of money too. So like they had already spent hundreds of millions of dollars, and the game to have that much of a fuck up, I'm pretty sure somebody at Sony was like, all right, guys, enough is enough. Let's take her out to the back of the barn and, well, you know how it is.
Take her to the back of the barn and shoot the money in the head.
Cost about $400 million to make, soup to nuts. Sony put most of that money in, and it is not only so, because we had kind of said like this must be Sony's biggest loss ever on a game, and it is. It's the biggest
so far. I think they can do better.
Okay, that was funny.
I think they'll do it. I think they could do something even worse than this.
Game Sony's ever released from a budgetary standpoint from the first party or second
most
party.
Expensive.
So
most expensive, and their profit is they made 0.25% of what they spent.
That sink in.
It's crazy,
and it's totally unintuitive. There are games that are in development right now at Sony first and second party that are more expensive than this.
Now here's the thing. If they had made an innovative game, something that didn't exist previously, to occupy a market that doesn't currently exist, they'd probably do well. But this is already a saturated market, right? Isn't Overwatch in this niche?
But as of the games that have come out so far, so think about like Spider-Man 2, and so on and so forth. We know The Last of Us Part 2 cost $220 million. Spider-Man 3 is going to cost about $350 million. This game costs more.
I wonder if the people that are making games ever think to themselves, maybe we're spending too much money on making these games. Because like if it costs $350 million, right? Like let's talk the economics of this.
You got to justify it.
If it goes from 260 to 320,
it must be like bureaucracy. You know what I'm saying? You know how like government is very inefficient, and like the money that runs government, well, a lot of it goes to just paying the wages of the people that work for the government and doesn't actually go towards the services. That's what it sounds like. It sounds like just bloating. Like, you could probably make a better game with, like, a studio of 10 people, you know, $1 million or whatever, and make a better game. And they're motivated to actually do something that's good, rather than motivated to leech as much money as possible off the company.
They're probably expecting to either sell more copies or charge more money, right? Because everything they have, like, a goal projection. And you can assume that internally the goal is not to make less money than the last product, right? That you can easily assume that they are trying to make more money than they made on the last one. So, how are they going to make that money? Are they going to have weird pre-order things? Are they going to have a early access? Is the game going to be $90 instead of $70? There's going to be something, because somewhere down the line, somehow they're going to have to make that extra $80 million back.
Than that, and they lost all of it.
Yeah,
because they made no money. They made about $1 million gross revenue.
$1 million. Spend $400 million and you make $1 million.
Not bad. That's 1 divided by 400. What is that? 0.025% or something? Lordy Lord.
Gross revenue, not net.
Gross.
Oh my god.
You're out 399. 399 mil in the hole. I want my money back. Disaster. Then refunded the game and threw it out in the trash. Refunded the money.
That's incredible.
And then they gave it all back. So this is a huge, multiple hundreds of millions of dollar loss. Now
they could have invested into Bored Apes and they would have made more money.
They could have invested 400 million on the stock market. Done better than that.
You could have invested into Enron almost and probably made more money.
Not even probably. Certainly.
I think of like just massive failures that would still make more money than this. You mean lost less money? Yeah, I guess so.
Question is, why? Why did this happen?
Oh, because Enron went down and lost 80% of its stock price or some crap. This is way worse than that.
That's a good question.
This game was heavily championed behind the scenes. Now we know this because Sony ended up...
Go woke? Go what?
What's funny is that the game is presented in Q1 2023 as this...
Dude, this is really going to be like what I was saying about how the PS5 Pro was probably leaning super hard on Concord. They were probably betting on this being a huge W, and I bet they had to like fucking rush cut like a third out of the PS5 Pro trailer.
You know, we're kind of getting towards the end. The game is nowhere near being done. It's in a horrible position. And then Sony buys the team.
Yeah.
The idea behind this was, and the term apparently verbatim had been used, that Concord is the future of PlayStation.
Disaster.
That they had such major ambition for this game that it was referred to internally as a Star Wars-like project for Sony.
Yeah. What a mess. Imagine the level of, like, lack of self-awareness that you need, right? To think crap like this. Imagine.
I think that there's a lot of people that need to get fired.
Indeed.
Like, you just, I mean, like, you can't, I mean, that's a no, that's not true. It's a $399 million mistake. You can't just mess something up like that. That's crazy.
Basically ruin the lives of, like, every developer. Like, how many people? 100 people? 200 people? 300 people? All screwed because of this.
That it can be repeatedly revisited over and over and over again.
Oh, wait, you're right. It is 400 because they gave everybody all their money back.
What a mess. My God, guys. Okay. Oh, man. Let's end the video there. Hit the like, hit the sub, hit all for notifications. Go buy my books like Hunter M, Adrian R, Tom and Bobby, Dylan, Renaissance Press, Brian, Andrew, Alan, Armani, and Nicholas. Shout outs to you. Most recent purchase of both my books, Strategist Guide to Seduction and Quotes to Live By. Thank you. You can buy my books at bit.ly/heliosbooks. If you'd like coaching services, message me at theheliosblog@gmail.com and I'll slot you right in. Thank you so much for listening, guys, especially if you listen to the end. I really do appreciate it. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time.